and we are back with more fantastic content led by Dr. Bernadette Johnson. So before I hand the session over to her, I would like to give the honors and introduce her. So Dr. Bernadette Johnson is Chief Technology Officer at the MIT Lincoln Laboratory. Prior to this appointment, she served as Chief Science Officer at Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, accelerating commercial innovation for the Department of Defense. Dr. Johnson was also the recipient of Lincoln Lab's Technology Excellence Award for her system-level architecting, technical innovation, and prototype demonstration. She holds a PhD in plasma physics and has served as a member of the Naval Studies Board since 2012. And with this, it is my pleasure and honor to hand the session over to you, Bernadette. Take it away.
Thank you, Yulia. So welcome, everybody. I'm going to make you one request logistically as I share my screen here, which is if you have questions, you might as well address them to everyone, because I have a couple colleagues, Teresa included, who will be looking at the chat and helping to answer questions while I'm speaking, because I am definitely not capable of doing that at the same time. So let me just go into appropriate presenter mode here. As we kind of promised throughout the last talk, this is an opportunity to oops, sorry, I've got a very sensitive mouse. This is an opportunity for us to share with you how it is that you can consider working with us. So let me just move straight along. Teresa mentioned in the last talk that we are an FFRDC, but I wanted to be able to explain a little bit more what that actually means. So next chart here. And I want to thank my colleagues at MITRE Corporation who put together a lovely little YouTube video called the FFRD Explainer. I highly encourage you to check it out. And I stole this graphic directly from that. So thanks, MITRE. But there are so many things about FFRDCs that people don't really appreciate that it's worth taking just a moment, because those things in fact dictate how we work with the commercial sector. FFRDCs were created after World War II with the recognition that many of the universities and other nonprofit laboratories who had helped during the war effort were all going to go back to their regular jobs. And the government found that having access to that kind of expertise and those resources was very important. They were viewed as the original public-private partnerships. And there were a few conditions of the establishment of the FFRDCs. They persist to this day. Number one is they must be nonprofit. So we are a non-for-profit. They can't have any conflict of interest with the commercial sector. So even the administration of the FFRDCs under the DoD must in fact be by nonprofit entities. We don't manufacture or sell anything. What we do at Lincoln Laboratory is we build prototypes. We don't work for commercial companies. You can't hire us to do a job for you. You can in fact pay us to do collaborative research. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. And one of the big ones is that we exist solely at the discretion of the government under a strict proviso that we do not compete with industry. So as you can see in the blue tagline below, that's part of the original language, the federal language that codifies FFRDCs. And the idea here is that we do the research that cannot be done or cannot be met effectively with the in-house service of agency laboratories or via contractors. So another question people often ask is how much of the federal R&D budget actually goes to FFRDCs. And I'm showing here on the right a graphic that shows in 2019, the fraction of all the federal R&D obligations by performer. What you see is about $150 billion that was available in 2019. About 10% of it goes to the FFRDCs. So not a very large fraction for the work that is accomplished with the FFRDCs. Many government agencies have FFRDCs. The DoD actually has 10. Those 10 FFRDCs break into systems engineering, studies and analysis, and R&D. And of the 3 that are R&D FFRDCs for the Defense Department, we are by far the largest. But I will iterate again, we are MIT employees. We do not work for the government. FFRDCs are not government entities. So having said that, it's really important to say, well, what is the posture of the FFRDC culture on technology transfer? And it's really important. I promise I won't go through this whole chart. It's important to understand how much legislative authorities have been put in place to affect or implement effective technology transfer throughout the decades, starting really back around 1980 with the Bayh-Dole Act and the Stevenson-Weidler Act, which basically allows for the inventors of technologies receiving federal funding at universities and not-for-profits to keep the ownership of that intellectual property, provided that they do two things. One, they have to be a good steward of that property, that intellectual property, and two, they have to cede to the United States government rights to use that property in support of government objectives. But you can see throughout the decades, many other things have been developed to enable technology transfer out of federal laboratories or based on federal funding into the private sector. Most notably, the Small Business Acts of 1992, the expansions of those acts to include STTRs, much language in the National Defense Authorization Acts up through the years that are, again, promoting this pull out of the laboratories and into the commercial sector. So there's a particular set of reasons why the Defense Department has been engaging with the commercial sector, and many of you have probably seen the graph on the right or a graph like it that basically shows the federal R&D investment compared to the private R&D investment over the past several decades. Whereas at one time, the federal R&D was much larger, round about the mid-70s, the commercial spending on R&D really exceeded the federal spending, and it's now more than 3 to 1. So the billions of dollars that the military invests in R&D, as you can see, is still a small fraction of total investment. And one complaint that many of us have had in the Defense Department is that the timelines for development are often quite long, certainly long compared to the commercial sector. I'll also point out that many of that private R&D is riding on the technology developments that were in fact supported and funded by federal R&D. I think, for example, the internet and GPS and search and autonomous systems. But nonetheless, the reality is that with greater dollars to leverage in the private sector, it's really important that the Defense Department do so also. At the same time that this federal R&D, private R&D is growing, what we've seen is a rapid, a relative diminishing of the spending on R&D in the defense industrial base and a rapid decline in the actual number of companies that comprise the defense industrial base. A problem that we face is that what we call non-traditional companies don't always want to or know how to do business with the federal government. And that's a lot of this, several $100 billion that is spent annually. And finally, perhaps one of the most important ones from the national security perspective is that while our adversaries are free to go buy whatever they want, we are not always so free. So we don't always have access to the technologies that we would like to. Hence this growing awareness that engagement with the commercial sector, it's good for national security and it's good for the economy. So how do we do it? This is the standard business model at Lincoln Laboratory in terms of what we produce versus what we come in. So government sponsors come to us with specific national security challenges. These are problems they want solved that they can't typically get solved elsewhere. The output of these problems are prototypes that we develop. And again, we don't sell or manufacture, we make prototypes. Some of those prototypes go directly to industry, often to integrate into larger systems. Some go right to the user community. They can be fully operational, they can be tools or devices or processes. And many times prototypes that we developed go to industry for then subsequent use by the user community. So you see this sort of back and forth over on the right-hand side. But by no means do we do this alone. We get a lot of input at the early stages as well as feedback at the later stages from the user community, from the operational community that actually wants to use these technologies. But our R&D partners are critical and crucial to the solutions that we develop. Those are academia, sometimes at very basic and foundational research, and with small and medium businesses who are able to do some of the more applied research and prototyping. So this is kind of the flow of how we solve problems for the US government, but the other part of what we do, which is how we transition it out, comes through commercialization. And that commercialization is direct licensing to the very small or medium-sized businesses that do business and help us support, solve our problems, and also to some of the larger industry members. This whole loop that I'm describing here, this engagement with the commercial sector is what allows us to meet our government needs as well as contribute to economic competitiveness. These are a list of the mechanisms whereby we collaborate with others. It's a short list. I didn't put everything up here. The ones in green, you're actually going to hear after I'm finished speaking from some folks who have those contractual relationships with us now. Hence, I highlighted them in green. One of the most, I think, productive mechanisms for technology transfer comes from a CRADA, Cooperative Research and Development Agreements. Remember early on I said you can't hire us to work for you, but you can pay us to do collaborative research. If we, for example, have developed a technology for a government sponsor, and you think that with some work, it could be adapted to a commercial need that would help, improve the benefit mankind in some way, we will engage in collaborative research with you. And those collaborative research agreements often include with them options for licensing and subsequent transfer. Next down are the small business innovative research and small business technology transfer efforts. Every agency that conducts R&D takes a small fraction of its R&D budget and puts it into these pools of funds and distributes it preferentially to small businesses. Any of you out there who qualify as small businesses can contact us when you see an SBIR or an STTR that's in an area that you think we have expertise in and can help partner with you. We don't do many of these, maybe 10 or 12 a year, but we do advertise on our website ones that we're particularly interested in partnering with you on. Another thing that Teresa mentioned earlier are test agreements. This allows commercial entities or private sector organizations in general to come and use our facilities or certain facilities to test and evaluate their technologies. This is not an R&D mechanism. That requires a different contractual relationship, but the reality is many of our resources are available for you to use. The Commercial Solutions opening is a name I stole directly from my years at Defense Innovation Unit, and it's a subcontracting vehicle that they really pioneered that allows for streamlined R&D subcontracts. Meaning when we don't have a specific set of requirements where we want you to say, it has to be this big and it needs this power consumption and et cetera, but rather we have a general problem to solve, then what we'll do is articulate that problem and invite companies to give us a white paper. If we like the white paper, we invite companies to come in and give us a pitch. And then we work together to develop the statement of work and get them on contract. And then the final mechanism is a standard R&D subcontract. This is the case where we actually know what we're looking for. We'll put out an RFI or an RFP, and those would be then issued typically to small to medium-sized businesses to support specific services. So for more information, there's a whole section on the website called Partner With Us. And then there's even a section under there that if you're interested in being notified of SBIR or STTR opportunities that we're interested in, or CSOs that we issue, you can sign up, just register who you are, what your technical areas of expertise are, and what kind of a small business you might be, or a non-traditional defense contractor. So as I mentioned, after I'm finished speaking in a couple of minutes, the highlighted in green will be a few people with whom we have current contracts in these areas. I wanted to then just talk a little bit about our strategy or our philosophy in general for engaging with small businesses. We are contractually required to let about at least 42% of all our contracts and procurements to small businesses. And every year we meet or exceed that number. So we're showing here, last year we won the Dwight D. Eisenhower Award, which is given to organizations that excel in their use of small businesses in subcontracting. And given the times, it is unfortunate that they are both masked, but this picture will live on in infamy, I'm sure. But that's our Assistant Director for Operations receiving that particular award from Ms. Carranza. I'm just showing you on the right, last year of all the procurements that we issued, we gave out $258 million in subcontracts to small businesses. So we take this quite seriously. We track it. We track the types of small business, and we're always looking for opportunities to increase that engagement. And then finally, I want to talk about one other mechanism that we engage with small businesses that's kind of new, and that is entrepreneurial research fellows. We just started this in FY20 under funding from DARPA and coordinated through the Activate, which is a nonprofit that is coordinating activities across ourselves and Lawrence Berkeley Lab. The idea here is these are 2-year fellowships where startups can apply, and they embed actually at Lincoln Laboratory for 2 years. We mentor them, they use our resources, they grow their companies, and at the end, they hopefully launch stronger and more capable. We're actually just selecting the FY21 cohort, so it's too late this year, but stay tuned. Every fall, this fellowship opportunity opens up, and we invite folks to apply for the next fiscal year. So with that, I will just say, again, contact us at this, it will find us. So anybody that you hear from today, this is a good contact information and a good way to find who we are.